166. Take one.
No, because the room is that big.
What room is that big?
Orson Welles has been called many things by many people.
He's been called a genius almost from birth.
One of the most creative people in the entertainment business.
At 22, he was producing, directing, and starring in Broadway and brightened the country with the radio broadcast War of the World.
The man who at 26 made and starred in Citizen Kane, a film constantly voted the best movie ever made.
Would you please welcome Mr. Orson Welles?
Every time you mention his name, people say, what did he do since Citizen Kane?
Drifted off to lesser work and grew enormously fast.
That's what you think.
End of a career that had once promised so much.
Do you feel any kind of resentment for what Hollywood did to you?
Orson, is it true that when Citizen Kane was being made, that people actually tried to stop it being made?
When they got done with production, he went off looking for his next gig. The studio took a look at the cut. They really didn't like what they saw.
So thus, in effect, he was
blackballed.
Blackballed.
What room is that big?
This video is supported by my Patreon.
Orson Welles is somebody who essentially didn't have a childhood.
Ladies and gentlemen, there are many voices in this story.
What age were you when you were orphaned?
But they are all telling the same tale. Shall we begin?
Does the word home mean anything to you?
Oh, yes.
And when you think of it, where do you think of it?
That's a problem.
Where is Orson Welles' hometown?
He is from Kenosha, Wisconsin. Somebody once said to me, why are all the great people from the Middle West?
Do you ever go back to Kenosha?
I left when I was 3 weeks old.
I do a lot of traveling. I've been traveling all my life, as a matter of fact. I was born in America, but raised partly in China and sent about the world a good bit before the war. And
Lots of homes, but I would like to have the one, but I don't, you know.
You don't have a rosebud?
No.
No such thing for you?
No.
What age were you when you were orphaned?
Well, my mother died when I was 9. My mother was a professional musician, and I stopped playing immediately. Abandoned my career in music. That's what I was supposed to be destined for. And my father died when I was 15, beginning of my 15th birthday.
so there's a very close connection in both films to my father.
I left when I was 3 weeks old.
At 3 weeks, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Did anyone try to talk you out of leaving at that age? He was called a boy genius, the way that Mozart and Keats.
Everybody told me from the moment I was able to hear that I was absolutely marvelous. I painted it, they said, nobody's ever seen such painting. I played, nobody's ever played like that. I never heard a discouraging word for years. I didn't know what was ahead of me.
I thought it was a very, very cruel, mean-spirited, and essentially destructive job.
The communism business, which was lousy, a cheap, rotten way to hurt somebody.
1941. Orson Welles has just finished Citizen Kane. William Randolph Hearst finds out about the movie. Finds out it's about him.
Hearst was absolutely furious about this film and wanted it destroyed.
Hearst, you see, launched such an attack on us, particularly on me.
There are other communists who don't show their real faces, who work more silently.
Then it would stick in America, you know, by pointing a finger and calling him a communist. That could stick. Total lies about me bother me much more than they ought to. I don't know why I'm so touchy about it.
Are there any legends about you that you would like to scotch right now, like the fact that you, at the age of 4 months or something, wrote a thesis on Nietzsche's philosophy, or...
When Orson Welles was 18 months old, a family friend, a physician named Maurice Bernstein, was visiting the home of Dick and Beatrice Wells. when the doctor peered inside the room of baby Orson's. From his crib, the child looked at Bernstein and said, "The desire to take medicine is one of the greatest features which distinguishes men from animals."
All these incredible things like that.
Yeah, pack of lies.
Pack of lies?
Pack of lies. I was rather backward student.
Orson did, however, receive a scholarship to Harvard at the age of 15.
That's true. I had a scholarship to go to Harvard. Hollywood is what I wanted to say. What I wanted to go to was Hollywood. What I had the scholarship for was Harvard.
In order to avoid Harvard, he ran away.
I really ran away with a few $100s that was found in the box after my father died.
I have to go back to the very beginning of my career, which was in Ireland.
I have this image of you in Ireland, coming over a hill with a horse and a cart, as it's been reported.
Cart.
A donkey?
At night, I slept under the cart. It was a very nice summer. But then when I got to Dublin, the donkey had to go up for auction. So did I.
Oh, I guess I could have found myself an honest job. No, I took the easy way.
I went to the Gate Theatre, which was the great theatre of Dublin, and I told them I was a famous star from New York, and that it would amuse me for a few weeks to play some leading parts in that theatre.
Somehow got them to believe me.
I saw this brilliant, not necessarily an actor, but a brilliant creature of 16 telling us he'd had lots of experience, which was obvious to us he'd had none at all, but he was more than brilliant.
So they gave me a star part. I began as a star. And I've been working my way down slowly ever since.
While performing at the Gate Theatre, Orson was featured in a New York Times article. An American actor in Dublin. This young man is Orson Welles, whose performance is amazingly fine. High praise from the New York Times. A few years later, Orson will find himself on the cover of every newspaper in America.
Were you aware of terror at the time you were giving this role? Were you aware that terror was going on throughout the nation?
I was the Shadow, as you probably know.
Lamont Cranston.
Lamont Cranston.
Isn't it, Lefty?
What do you know about that?
The Shadow knows.
There was nobody that did radio the way Orson did.
In those days, it was interesting. The shows were live on radio, most of them. Some of them were transcribed.
No, network shows had to be live, but by law.
And you would play like maybe 5, 6, or 7 different shows, like in New York City, playing different characters on each one, right?
I used to go by ambulance from one radio station to another because I discovered there was no law in New York that you had to be sick to travel in an ambulance. So I hired the ambulance and I would go from CBS to NBC.
In order to get from one soap opera to another, you know? And I wouldn't know what I was going to play.
I wouldn't rehearse. So I'd come in the door, they'd hand me a script and
say Studio 3. I'd go into Studio 3. They'd hand me a piece of paper. I'd say, what is it? And they'd say,
80-year-old dying. And I'd say, oh, come to me, son of the out. Into the taxi down.
Wait a minute. Let me have 80-year-old dying again.
Yeah.
Let me have it.
I used to do it better. I suddenly realized I shouldn't have gone into that. As I said, I had 2 careers. One was as an actor, and I used that money for my theaters.
In 1937, Orson Welles
dared a production of Macbeth, which was laid in a West Indian island suggestive of Haiti.
And with the estate of the world will now undone.
He felt that if he could do this with a group of black actors who were not versed in Shakespeare, what could he not do?
That was Orson. He liked to be challenged with impossible odds.
There was no way possible some of these souls were going to be able to read Shakespeare.
It worked surprisingly well, because the actors were very good, and changing the blasted heath to the fetid jungle wasn't as ridiculous as you might think.
I wanted to give the black actors a chance to play classics without it being funny, you know, or even exotic. It just, there it is.
Everybody seemed to like the show. The critics were very kind to us.
My great success in my life was that night. The opening night, there were 5 blocks
in which all traffic was stopped. You couldn't get near the theater in Harlem. Everybody who was anybody in the black or white world was there. When the play ended, there were so many curtain calls that finally they left this curtain open, and the audience came up on the stage to congratulate the actor. And that was magical.
What room is that big?
Our studio, seat 58, take 2.
To what extent have you controlled your destiny, and to what extent has your destiny been controlled by circumstances?
Greetings, everybody. My name is Walter Birch. Happy to be here. In 1997, I got a phone call from somebody that I had never met before. His name was Rick Schmidlin, and he was a producer involved in a project to revive Touch of Evil, Orson Welles' 1958 film.
Orson's last Hollywood film. During production, Universal loved the dailies so much that they wanted Orson to sign on for 5 more films. But Orson didn't have final cut. So when he finished his version of the film,
Orson had left the country, gone down to Mexico, I think, to try and raise money to make Don Quixote.
Universal looked at Orson's version and they were horrified.
Rewrote sections, reshot, re-edited, and ended up with what we referred to as the preview version.
The studio went to Orson with their preview version and said,
"We're only going to show you the film once. You cannot stop the film." So there was Welles sitting in a theater, and then he stayed up all night that night and typed up a 58-page memo.
The memo that Orson Welles wrote was a pleading memo to change it within significant punctuation points to make it play as a better and more commercial movie.
Orson's 58-page memo was lost for many years.
Somehow Rick managed to find it. It was in Charlton Heston's file cabinet.
You think anyone would believe that?
They always believe me. That production of Julius Caesar is still regarded as the single most important production of Shakespeare ever done on the American stage.
We're going to do a show against the Nazi regime. We'll do it as the Nuremberg Festival, all with lights.
This year they say there are 800,000 pairs of boots standing heel to heel, waiting for the Führer's final speech.
An imitation of the lights that Hitler used at Nuremberg. They went straight up in the air.
You would have seen this poor fellow walk into a pool of light.
I dreamt tonight.
And then gradually people start circling around.
As they completely surrounded me, they rushed me down the ramp,
signifying the slaughter of Cinna. Offstage was a Hammond organ, and all the bass notes were hit.
Stopped the show. The applause lasted some nights for 3 minutes. You know, that's a whole evening.
After Caesar, Orson was featured on the cover of Time magazine. The brightest moon that has risen over Broadway in years. Welles should feel at home in the sky. The sky is the only limit his ambitions recognize.
Wait a minute, something's happening. I can make out a small beam of light against a mirror.
We had a lot of real radio nuts on as commentators of this period.
Humped shape is rising out of the pit.
People believed anything they heard on the radio. And I said, let's do something impossible and make them believe it.
Any moment now, President Roosevelt will be receiving a delegation from
Mars. From Mars, peace talks are expected.
Well, the War of the Worlds, of course, which is kind of a Halloween joke. We had a weekly radio broadcast.
The War of the Worlds was before World War II, remember? Before television. In the great days of radio.
What's that? There's a jet of flame springing from the mirror and it leaps right at the advancing men. It strikes them head on.
Well, we said that the Martians were releasing a noxious gas across the Jersey meadows that was drifting towards New York, so people took to the hills.
Lord, they're turning into flames. Now the whole field's caught up by the woods, the barns, the gas spreading everywhere. It's coming this way now, about 20 yards to my right.
Is there anyone on the air? Isn't there anyone?
Indeed. Were you aware of terror at the time you were giving this role? Were you aware that terror was going on throughout the nation?
Oh, no, of course not.
Now, when you were putting that together, did you and the staff say, this'll really terrify them?
Yes.
This'll really get them?
Yes.
Orson Welles, a liar.
Why not? I'm a charlatan. But we didn't think it would get them that much or that many. You know, this was done for the benefit of a certain lunatic fringe.
Somebody down in South America did an imitation of that broadcast, and he ended up in prison. I didn't go to jail. I went to Hollywood.
Having conquered radio, having conquered theater, the next logical step in his evolution was Hollywood.
I mean, it's hard to say you started there at a time which has become legendary now.
Yes, I was at the end of it.
There was the one beatnik. You know, there was this guy with a beard who was going to do it all by himself, you know?
He said to me he wore the beard because he'd been doing some kind of performance or something, you know, hadn't had time to shave. And then when he saw it irritated people, he decided to keep it.
That you were a bit of a renegade or a bit of a rebel at that time. And I just wonder if you are still that, or now with your success and the legend that has grown around.
I made no campaign promises.
Citizen Kane, flat out, greatest American film.
On the other hand, I am the publisher of the Inquirer. As such, it's my duty, and I'll let you in on a little secret. It's also my pleasure.
People are always asking me, did I know it was going to be a landmark film? No, I did not, and I didn't care. I couldn't have cared less. I think Orson knew it was going to be...
Pretentious. Pretentious.
...important.
It means everything to me. Citizen Kane is
A ham sandwich.
the icon of courage. I'm not talking about the courage of the filmmaker, the courage, the audacity.
What Citizen Kane really did for me was to show what that name on the film did.
Ignorance. There's no authority in the world like it. It was pretty much like my beginnings in the theater. I had the confidence of ignorance.
And I'm going to deepen the focus. We're going to see from 1 inch to infinity in every shot. We're going to see ceilings.
Talk about the people as though you own them.
What he did, Wells, was literally, he was not afraid of being self-conscious with the camera.
Awful lot about the working man.
Letting the audience understand, yes, the camera is looking through the floor up into the ceiling.
Ceilings.
Yeah, everybody says...
I did it all. There's ceilings in movies all over the place before mine.
You know, I think Orson Welles, again, like Kubrick and like other important masters, was trying to tell us something about power.
Not just every scene, but every shot has an idea.
It's just one of the great movies ever made.
Wells was the one to really open up the Pandora's box of cameras.
In Kane, there were these technical advances that everybody's talked about until they're blue in the face.
All the things that are talked about in your life as being innovated by Orson Welles.
If you see Kane again today, you can see have been largely digested by the film industry. I mean, you see the ceilings are now in the shots, the lighting of Kane is now in all kinds of films.
How many of them were a cooperative effort by Orson Welles and people like Gregg Toland and Henry Mankiewicz?
An enormous amount of them,
Of course, he shares the title card with Gregg Toland, director of photography and directed by, on the same card.
I had in my first picture in Kane the greatest cameraman who ever lived, who was Gregg Toland.
They loved each other because they were both creative geniuses, and they listened to each other and tried things together. And Gregg never got over not working with Orson. He didn't live an awful long time after that, although he was a young man.
And he came to my office and said, I want to work in your picture. My name is Toland. I said, why do you, Mr. Toland? He said, because you've never made a picture. And you don't know what cannot be done.
Whatever I said, he'd say, well, it can't be done, but we'll do it.
Citizen Kane comes from the intelligence of one young man who was so gifted, Orson Welles, and so fortunate in his collaborators, Gregg Toland, who photographed it, and specifically Herman J. Mankiewicz, who co-wrote the screenplay.
Please, call me Mank.
Mank.
Hello, everyone.
Nobody would give you an argument if you said my father was a self-destructive man.
Mank.
Lederer was a friend of my father's.
Good morning, Charles.
Marion.
And my father gave him a copy of the script. Now, you want to talk self-destructive, I suppose that's... When it came back to my father, it was annotated clearly by the Hearst lawyers. And I think that's probably how the old man learned that Citizen Kane was about him.
Is it true that Randolph Hearst, the newspaper tycoon, took it as being an attack on himself and tried to stop it when it was made being shown?
I think the thing was a perfectly clear attempt to assassinate Orson.
There was indeed a very definite effort to stop the film during shooting.
They tried to have it destroyed. They even tried to frame me. In one town, I was doing some kind of date, I don't know what, bond tour, lecture, some kind of a gig, and I was in a nightclub afterwards.
And a waiter said, there's a policeman wants to see you. And
I tried to hide, because if that ever happens, I'm sure I'm guilty. I don't know how you are about it, but, you know,
Absolutely.
the minute I see a cop, I know I did it. But,
and the cop turned out to be very nice. He said,
Orston. I don't know why they always call me Orston.
He said, don't go back to your hotel room. I said, why? He said, they've got an underage girl, undressed, and photographers waiting for you.
And they were going to frame me. I would have been in jail. That was not Mr. Hearst itself. It was somebody in that town who thought he'd get in good with the boss by
doing a favor.
Doing a favor.
Yeah.
They had the producers in Hollywood ready all together to pay RKO to burn the negative. It was nip and tuck, you know. Whether the negative would be burnt, the picture never shown.
Say, how much does destiny control me? A great deal. There are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamed of in our philosophy.
Cut. That was beautiful.
Okay, let's get to the movie, shall we?
No, not looking down, Larry. Looking away. Looking away, Larry! Larry!
Would you say that you live to work or work to live?
It'd be foolish to fire that gun. These mirrors, it's difficult to tell. You are aiming at me, aren't you? I'm aiming at you, lover.
Before I could stop her, she stood up in the boat. The magnificence of the Ambersons began in 1873.
I remember there was a scene. Do you want me to tell you about a scene that he directed? Yeah. There was a scene in Magnificent Ambersons. It was by the boiler scene. It was a very hysterical scene.
I've got $28.
This particular part that I was doing, he said to me, now, I want you to play it like a little girl. And, of course, that wasn't the characterization that I had made up my mind to do at all. So I played it and we went through it.
I know. I told Jack I didn't put everything in the headlight company.
The second time he said, I want you to play it like an insane woman. And I played it like an insane woman.
Try and understand that it's impossible for either of us to go on this way. Will you get up?
I can't.
And then the next time he said, now I want you to play it like she's absolutely inebriated. And I played it that way.
I'm too weak.
And again he said, now I want you to play without absolutely, just an absolutely vacuous mind. And by the time I thought to myself, what in the world does he want?
I wouldn't use 5 cents no matter how tired I was.
For the gosh sakes, will you get up?
And I did it 11 times.
Don't sit there with your back against the boiler.
Different characterizations, 11 times.
Get up, Aunt Fanny.
It's not hot. It's cold. The plumber's disconnected.
And then the 12th time, after he was absolutely satisfied with the technical part of it, he said to me, now play it.
I wouldn't mind if they hadn't. I wouldn't mind if it burned. I wouldn't mind if it burned me, George!
The job of a director is to discover in the actor something more than he knew he had.
freshly refreshed.
Comment avez-vous
It's, I think, the greatest artistic tragedy in the movies that that particular film was so mutilated.
Really honored to be a part of this evening's tribute to a man I've known and loved for so many years.
Joseph Cotton was very close to Orson Welles.
And they, you know, and Cotton, I know, felt very bad about doing it, and yet he wrote Orson, you know, several letters in which he explained why he thought it was best.
Aside from the astounding impact that Orson has had on the theater and motion pictures,
you know, he's betraying Orson, but he doesn't really realize it.
he is completely and absolutely responsible for aiding, abetting, and encouraging some of us to become actors.
It's very sad. There wasn't anybody came out of it good.
Well, he made us go on radio. He pushed us onto the stage of the Mercury Theater. And as if that were not enough, he literally shanghaied us to Hollywood to act in Citizen Kane.
Look, he wants to buy the world's biggest diamond. Mr. Leland, why didn't you go to Europe with him?
There's another important thing. That is for me. In fact, it's the only thing that makes me forgive that base file for getting in my way.
Except Ambersons, the end of it, there's a very serious piece of surgery involved there, change. Which wasn't done by you? No.
I was sent to South America by Nelson Rockefeller and Jock Whitney. It was thought by everybody in Hollywood that it was too downbeat.
To go to South America, Wells had to leave behind the editing in Magnificent Ambersons, and the studio, in his absence, shot a new ending and butchered the picture.
By the time I returned from South America, I no longer was invited into the cutting room.
Consequently, we did cut about 25 or 30 minutes of the original film, and we had to make 2 or 3 or 4 new bridge scenes.
There are 2 short scenes in it I didn't write or direct, and over 3 reels were taken out in their entirety, and they were, in my view, the reason for making the film.
The real point of Ambersons is that part of it which was really just a preparation for the decay of the Ambersons.
You've been denied the cutting room before.
Several times.
Just
yes,
recently, on
constantly.
a touch of evil.
Yes.
Do you ever get over something like that?
Not really. You don't. You don't. But now that I have the opportunity, let me say this to you, Orson. Thank you very much.
A maverick may go his own way, but he doesn't think that it's the only way or ever claim that it's the best one, except maybe for himself. But it's a fact that many of the films you've seen tonight could never have been made otherwise. Or if otherwise, well, they might have been better, but certainly they wouldn't have been mine.
And each man hears as the twilight nears to the beat of his dying heart, the devil drum on the darkened pane. It's pretty, but is it art? Did you ever make a picture after Citizen Kane?
You haven't seen Citizen Kane in all these years?
No picture I've ever made, except as an actor, but never seen a picture I've directed.
But why wouldn't you want to see it now?
Because I like to sit here and think how good it must have been, you know. I used to be chased by a theme song for years, you know.
What was it?
Harry Lime. I'm so glad everybody forgot it.
Oh, yeah, from the Third Man.
Thank you, thank you.
Harry.
Well, he said that's the part. It's the greatest star part ever written. Well, you know what a star part is. He says that's where they talk about you for an hour and then you appear.
You must feel very proud to be a
You
colleague
see him very, very little in the movie. He has very few scenes, but you hear so much about him.
I was a friend of Harry Lime.
I'd very much like to meet you, Baron.
The Orson Welles performance is like a fireworks display. You know, you're waiting for it, and then it happens.
It's a very impactful scene. It's like, boom. Certainly that was one of the most memorable scenes in cinema, I think.
I was, to a large extent, the author of the dialogue of Harry Lime.
In Italy, for 30 years under the Borgias, they had warfare, terror, murder, and bloodshed, but they produced Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci, and the Renaissance.
Including the cuckoo clock and all that kind of stuff.
In Switzerland, they had brotherly love. They had 500 years of democracy and peace, and what did that produce? The cuckoo clock. So long, Holly.
It really takes on another level and just sustains, no matter how many times you see it.
Orson Welles certainly at his most mysterious. Vienna looking very photogenic. There's this extraordinary black and white photography, and you can feel the wetness in the stones of Vienna.
Even today, I can't think of many films that have eclipsed The Third Man.
And in fact, the whole film would be unthinkable without Citizen Kane, The Stranger, and The Lady from Shanghai.
Of course, killing you is killing myself. It's the same thing. But you know, I'm pretty tired of both of us.
Harry Cohen decided that the theme song would be nice in a sort of symphonic version under the shootout in the mirror scene. So instead of just hearing the crash of glass echoing and nothing else except ricocheting bullets and glass, you have please don't which kind of louses up the proceedings.
But it made him happy.
Yes, it made him happy.
What do you think of Hollywood, Orson?
I'm not at all against Hollywood. Not at all.
It would be ridiculous to be bitter about Hollywood. You're the one who sat down and joined the game, you know.
In fact, you have such a schedule. Why do you keep working so hard? It's because you seem to be juggling with about 4 or 5 whenever I meet you.
I regard working as part of life. I don't know how to distinguish between the two things aren't separated in my mind.
But why do you choose to live so much of your life in Europe?
Because I don't get very much work in America.
It's as simple as that, isn't it?
I think he stayed away from America because of the McCarthy years, because he definitely would have been called up.
May Hal, God forgive me for it. Before I knew thee, Hal, I knew nothing. And now a man should speak truly little better than one of the wicked.
In the end, what would you like people to remember you by when, after all, the time has come for you, like everybody else, you shuffle off to this mortal coil?
Out of all his movies, I think it's the most timeless movie he's ever made.
Doctor, to my water.
He said, sir, the water itself was a good one.
I remember him asking me, you know, would you like to be in a movie? And me saying no, because I've never wanted to be in a movie. And then he promised me money, so I said, okay, fine, I will, I'll do it.
Mistress Daltish.
Of course, he never paid me.
Well, I wish they would forget the things that are written in the serious American books and the kind of books that my children will find about me, which are written about the cinema and which are very derogatory.
Just vivid memories of editing, of the battle scene. I mean, that battle scene was, you know, went on forever. He had nobody, and he shot this battle. I was there when we were shooting the battle scene, and it was, you know, 3 men and a dog. I mean, I saw magic being done. You know, I can't tell you what or how, but it was extraordinary.
And I must say, if I'm talking about posterity, all I care about is really my children, my grandchildren.
By far, the best thing he's ever done is that battle scene. He felt that way too. That's one of the many reasons that he loved Chimes, I think, was that what he was able to do with no money, with really no money.
If somebody should ever want to know about me, which is the only posterity, I can't take the rest of it seriously. I really wish there was something nicer they could read about me.
I hope also somebody writes it for you pretty soon.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.